A brand new Star Wars trilogy was just teased by Rey actress Daisey Ridley. A continuation of the Skywalker saga is on its way. A possible episode 10, 11, and 12.
Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm.
But not only that, this might just be one of 3 new Star Wars trilogies on its way.
This is where the fun begins.
Daisey Ridley, the actress who plays Rey, just teased that her new Jedi Order movie is the beginning of a new trilogy. A possible episode 10, 11, 12 that has the possibility to tie together everything and allow us to get a Kenobi Season 2 and a Mandalorian trilogy. Now, before you say,
Mike, how the hell is a sequel trilogy following Rey's new Jedi Order going to help us get a Kenobi Season 2 and a Mando trilogy?
Hear me out. I can guarantee you by the end of this video, it will all make sense. Okay? But we got to go back to the beginning. At Star Wars Celebration in 2023, there were 3 new Star Wars movies announced. This Rey movie that we're talking about right now, that will follow Rey 15 years after the events of The Rise of Skywalker as she's trying to start a new Jedi Order. We also got the announcement that Dave Filoni is going to be getting his own Mandoverse crossover event movie. Not to be confused with the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, we'll get to that in a second. The third movie that was announced at Celebration in 2023 was James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi, taking place 25,000 years before the prequel trilogy, and will set up the first ever Force users, the first creation of a lightsaber, and the origins of the Jedi. But what if I told you that all 3 of these movies are going to be parts of their own trilogies? 3 brand new Star Wars trilogies on their way. And not only that, all 3 of these trilogies will be completely intertwined, even though they take place 25,000 years apart on the Star Wars timeline. I know it may sound crazy, but hear me out. Since that announcement at Star Wars Celebration in 2023, another Star Wars movie was announced. Like I said, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. This movie will be the first to release into theaters on May 22nd, 2026. Now, it's not that crazy to believe we'll be getting a Mando trilogy. The Mandalorian and Grogu is being directed by Jon Favreau, and like I just mentioned, Dave Filoni's also getting a Mando movie. And if we know anything about Star Wars, it doesn't work in twos.
Always 2 there are. No more, no less.
Okay, yeah, there's literally a rule of 2, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking trilogies. You got the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy. You're not just going to have the Mando 2, the duology, the duology. It doesn't work. The Mandalorian will be getting a trilogy, 2 movies already confirmed of the 3. Now, the James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi is a little bit different because we don't know for sure if there is going to be a trilogy because we don't know much about this movie at all. But it makes sense. If you're doing an Origins of the Jedi story, you're gonna want to take your time and not just try to jam-pack the whole damn thing into a 2.5-hour movie. And I think most fans assumed that there's no way they're just gonna be making a one-off movie of Rey. This isn't Solo or Rogue One. This is setting up the future of the Star Wars galaxy. They're not just gonna make one Rey movie. But now we actually have some evidence to support the theory that all 3 of these movies are going to be parts of trilogies. Thanks to what Daisey Ridley just said in an interview, as she said this: I feel like the new one / new ones will be so interesting. Time has passed and a lot has changed for me personally. So it'll be interesting to come back to someone who I know so well, but in such a different moment. For me to inhabit Rey again after all the time we haven't seen her, it's actually scary, but it's also exciting. So this quote has got the Star Wars fandom running wild. Did she just say the new ones? Referring to Rey being in multiple new Star Wars movies? Yeah. She did. Now, with confirmation that Daisey Ridley will be in multiple new Star Wars films, it's not that crazy to think that this could be an extension of the Skywalker saga with episode 10, 11, and 12. And for those die-hard George Lucas fans out there, that's what George Lucas always intended Star Wars to be. In the original draft of Star Wars, it was a 12-movie series. George Lucas has talked about this many times over again in interviews, how it would start with Anakin, the Chosen One, and then his kids and his grandkids after that. But this is where things get a lot more interesting. This new sequel trilogy following Rey as she sets up the new Jedi Order could not only allow us to see very familiar fan favorite characters in the new Jedi Order, but also be intertwined and connect to not only the Mando trilogy, which takes place about 30 years before, but also the Dawn of the Jedi trilogy that takes place 25,000 years before.
How?
Well, first, let's start with possible appearances of fan-favorite characters in this new sequel trilogy. When you're starting a new Jedi Order, you're going to want the best Jedi in the galaxy around. And 15 years after the sequel trilogy, there's a lot of fan-favorite characters that could still be alive. Jedi like Grogu, Ahsoka Tano, Cal Kestis, Ezra Bridger, Finn, and more. So right there, you would have a bunch of connections to the Mandalorian trilogy. Characters like Grogu, Ahsoka, Ezra Bridger, Cal Kestis, those characters can show up in this Mando trilogy. But there could be an even bigger connection between these two stories. One that Ahsoka Season 1 and Season 2 might be setting up. A Legends character by the name of Abeloth. Now, I won't go too deep into the lore of Abeloth, it's a pretty long story. But to keep it short and sweet, she was a mortal who got this insane amount of power. She became so powerful that the Mortis gods that we see in the Clone Wars had to imprison her and hold her in that prison forever. Or at least until the Mortis gods died, all except for the sun, in the Clone Wars. So in theory, nobody is manning the prison. And Abeloth could be freed, and many Star Wars fans believe that Baylan Skoll at the end of Ahsoka Season 1 is going to free Abeloth. Now, little is known about Ahsoka Season 2, but we could infer, because Ahsoka, Sabine, Huge Wang, and Baylan Skoll are still on Peridea, that a lot of the story of Season 2 will be about the Mortis gods and about Abeloth's backstory. But with Grand Admiral Thrawn already returning back to the Star Wars galaxy we know and love, it's likely that this Mando trilogy is just going to be about Thrawn as the heir to the Empire. But just because Abeloth isn't the main threat of that trilogy doesn't mean she can't be set up in that trilogy and be the main villain in this sequel trilogy, following Rey in her new Jedi Order. With Palpatine gone, hopefully for good this time, and the Sith seemingly dying with him, as he said,
I am all the Sith.
there needs to be a great new villain for in episode 10, 11, 12. And who better than Abeloth, especially if she's set up over 30 years prior in the Mandalorian trilogy. So all that makes sense. Even if Abeloth is not the main villain of episode 10, 11, 12, that trilogy and the Mando trilogy will be very intertwined just because they are so close in the timeline. But how the is this sequel trilogy going to connect to the Dawn of the Jedi trilogy? Well, there's actually a few different things that could connect very easily. One being the sacred texts. The sacred texts that we see in The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi that Rey uses for training, we are going to see those sacred texts be written by the original Jedi. So we're not only getting to see Rey learn from those sacred texts, but we're also going to get to see those Jedi learn the abilities and then write them down in these books for Rey 25,000 years later. But there's more connections between these two trilogies than just those texts. There's also locations. We have already seen Ahch-To, which is the home of the first ever Jedi Temple. We've already been to Tython in The Mandalorian Season 2, where Grogu sits on the Seeing Stone. And it's likely in the sequel trilogy, we'll see Rey travel to different ancient Jedi temples all across the galaxy. But in this possible Dawn of the Jedi trilogy, we could see all of those temples be built for the first time. Seeing them be built and be brand new in that time period, and then 25,000 years be overgrown in ruins in a sequel trilogy. There are so many crazy intertwined connections between these three specific trilogies. And to have Daisey Ridley confirm that 10, 11, 12 could be happening is huge. Now you might still be yelling,
Mike, didn't you mention something about Kenobi Season 2?
yes, I was just talking about trilogies. I got ahead of myself. I forgot, okay? But let's talk about Kenobi Season 2. Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen have been very vocal about wanting to come back to their iconic roles of Anakin and Obi-Wan, or Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, for Kenobi Season 2. The only problem is they can't have a rematch of the century Part 2. Vader and Obi-Wan can't keep fighting before A New Hope. So what would be the plot of a second season? And how the hell would it connect to episode 10, 11, and 12? Well, that brings us to another possible villain from Legends, Darth Krayt. Darth Krayt is a very powerful Sith Lord who could be around at the time of this Rey movie. He was once a Tusken Raider by the name of Asherad Heth. He was once a Jedi Master during the time of the prequel trilogy. But when Order 66 happened, he went back to his home world of Tatooine and became a Tusken Raider. Yeah, that's right, a Tusken Raider Jedi. The only problem was he went down a dark path. As a Tusken Raider, he began to kill moisture farmers with his other Tusken Raider brothers, and when Obi-Wan Kenobi heard about a Tusken with a lightsaber killing moisture farmers, he had to protect Luke and Uncle Owen. And I guess Aunt Beru too. So Obi-Wan has to fight Asherad Het. This could be the plot of Kenobi Season 2. Obi-Wan can learn to become a Force ghost with Qui-Gon on Tatooine while also saving Luke from the Tusken Raider Jedi Asherad Het. Because in Darth Krayt's story, after Obi-Wan defeats Het, he leaves the planet of Tatooine in disgrace. He can't go back to his Tusken Raider family. He travels the galaxy, eventually ending up on a Sith planet, going down the path of the dark side. And years later, he returns as Darth Krayt. So a possible Kenobi Season 2 villain could end up being the main Sith Lord in an episode 10, 11, 12 trilogy. There are clearly many different ways to go about this new trilogy. Episode 10, 11, 12 seem to be on their way, according to Daisey Ridley, but it's more than that. This trilogy could be coming with 2 others, a Mando trilogy and a Dawn of the Jedi trilogy, and all 3 of them could be extremely intertwined. But tell me what you think in the comment section below. Do you want 3 new trilogies from Star Wars? And if we do get all 3, which one would you be the most excited for? Tell me in the comments below. And speaking of upcoming Star Wars projects, Skeleton Crew starts in 34 days. And I got a crazy suspicion that Cal Kestis is coming to live action in Skeleton Crew, but I explain all that in this video right here.